Hi guys, it's Joe here from Rufioh, bringing you some discussion content today, something that we don't normally do too much on this channel due to other circumstances, but let's not dig into that too much. So what I wanted to talk about today is, as you may have noticed, and this is something that again doesn't normally get covered on this channel, a little bit of OCG news out there that they've decided to go ahead and do a competition for the next structure deck that they're going to release, or I don't know if it's necessarily the next one, but one they're going to work on, with the intention of making it competitive. Now, there's a big competition, which loads of TCG players decided to go ahead and vote in. They did a few rounds and that kind of thing, and I was happy to see some Burning Abyss on there and Light Sworn. Unfortunately, those didn't go through. However, when the next rounds came up, it became apparent to me that the best choice was going to be Shaddolls. Now, Shaddolls went ahead and won that competition. There was actually a little bit of a twist in the tail at the end there, because Sacred Beasts are actually in the lead very, very close to the end, and Shaddoll actually jumped them right at the end, much to my appreciation, because I really didn't want to see a Sacred Beasts deck get some competitive support. I didn't really see the point in that, but there you go. So we've got our Shaddolls now coming. They won the vote by 1% of the vote. So they took up 34%, and I believe that Sacred Beasts took up like 33%. So it's pretty cool to see it's happening. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit today was what ideas they may have in order to make Shaddolls competitive in the current game. These are just some thoughts that I've had across the day whilst I've been sat thinking about how the deck functions, all that kind of thing. And as you guys know, I always love doing like my Dynodol profiles and that kind of thing. And especially at the beginning of this format, I had high hopes for how Shaddolls might do. So it'll be really, really nice to see some cool new support. So let's dig in and have an idea about what they can do and what current cards there are and how they might improve those going forward. So before we get stuck in too much into my ideas of what they may do going forward to improve the deck, I wanted to give you a brief description of what the deck is according to the Yu-Gi-Oh fandom page. So I've taken this straight from there, so the quote is extracted, just to give you a bit of an idea and a bit of a taster for those of you who may be less familiar with the deck, maybe returning to the game, or might just want a bit of a jog your memory sort of situation. So according to this entry, Shaddoll is an archetype comprised primarily of dark monsters that debuted in Duelist Alliance. That's pretty common knowledge now. Their focus is on the fusion summon of the more powerful El Shaddoll monsters, which restrict or punish special summons. The main deck Shaddoll monsters all have flip effects that focus on searching and field advantage, as well as secondary effects that focus on regaining advantage whenever they are sent to the graveyard by a card effect. So now that we've had a brief discussion about what it is that the Shaddolls kind of do, let's have a discussion about what some of the weaknesses are, and then we can go on to what they can kind of do to improve that and sort of bring them up to date in the modern game. Now, it's certainly no surprise to anyone that they've been more or less power crept out of the game. There are one or two cards that spring to mind. If we think of Construct, for example, she has sort of kept against the grain and actually still is a very, very powerful card, but they've brought it back to one, and the impact it's had on the meta really hasn't been that crazy. I do think we can maybe see multiples of that, but we'll get into that discussion later. And yeah, let's have a talk through about what makes them weak. So one of the things about Shaddolls is that they basically rely on sending all of the Shaddoll monsters to the graveyard in order to trigger effects, or flipping them face up. Now, the first key thing to look at there is the fact that they rely on flip effects to get most of their effects, or they need to be sent. So most of the time you don't really want them on the field. You're not going to be setting them. The modern game, setting cards, setting monsters is not a good look. It doesn't tend to go too well. Removal is way too high for that to be a sort of real benefit of a plan to play the game. So that's not really too ideal to do. And then, sending them to the graveyard, yes, there's plenty of ways to do that. But what it essentially means is that you're more or less, you want them in hand so that you can get rid of them. They're basically garnets. You want to send them from your deck, really, if truth be told, to get the benefit of what they do, but without having to have them in your hand. Now, what that means is that people are consistently running very, very small engines, maybe 3 to 5 of the main deck monsters, some of the fusion spells, and then some in the extra deck, just to get the benefits of the best ones. Now, what we really want to look at is how we can turn this deck into a deck that functions as a standalone, or it can be a deck with maybe a smaller engine instead, so that you're primarily a Shaddoll deck. That would be what they should really aim to do with these next structure decks, and that is what I believe that they will do. Now, in order for us to see how that kind of works, we need to take a look at, again, further what cards there are and how those can be improved. So I'll talk you through some of the monsters that we have. We'll look primarily through the main deck monsters. So we'll start with Shaddoll Beast. So, Shaddoll Beast's flip effect is that it draws 2 cards and discards 1 card. And if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can draw 1 card. You can only use the effects once per turn. That's pretty much standard all the way through. We move on to our next one. So we've got Shaddoll Dragon. So Shaddoll Dragon's effect is that when it's flipped, you can target one card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. That's target. Again, something that's kind of weak in the modern game, and it's a flip effect. If it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target one spell or trap on the field, target again, and destroy it again, only once per turn. We've got Squamata. So Squamata's effect is that you can target one monster on the field and destroy it. Again, target. It's not the strongest effect. If it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can send one Shaddoll card from your deck to the graveyard except itself. Which again, you can kind of thin your deck a little bit, I guess, and get some extra names in the graveyard if that's what you're going for. We move on to Hedgehog. So with Hedgehog, you can add one spell or trap from your deck, one Shaddoll spell or trap from your deck to your hand, and if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add one Shaddoll monster from your deck to your hand, except Shaddoll Hedgehog. And again, you can only use one Shaddoll Hedgehog effect per turn, and only once that turn. We then move on to Falco. So Falco's effect is that you can target one Shaddoll monster in your graveyard, except itself, or one of its name, and summon it in face-down defense position. Also, if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon it in face-down defense position. And again, the once per turn clauses are there. We've got Shaddoll Hound, which when flipped, you can target one Shaddoll card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. This is very, very susceptible to things like Call by the Grave and that kind of stuff. If it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target one monster on the field and change its battle position. It's not very, very strong, especially not in the modern sort of Ling format. It's kind of fallen out of favour for the most part. And that's it for the main deck monsters. So you've got an idea there of what they've got in their main deck, and there's not many options there that you kind of want to have in your hand and want to be summoning. It doesn't work very well. So again, we'll go into a bit of a discussion later, and we'll have a look at what they can do to improve that situation. So really, apart from those main deck monsters that we've discussed, which you don't really want too many of, the only thing we really see in play is Shaddoll Fusion itself. Sometimes El Shaddoll Fusion, and then we tend to see Construct, Shekanaga, and Winder in play. They're really the only ones that kind of see any play. And we have to look at ways that we can improve that. So what they need is maybe some generic options, generic support. A bit like with Burning Abyss, you have things like Phoenix Rhino Warrior, which, although it's not a Burning Abyss monster, it adds like an indirect support that could potentially be used by other stuff. That could be something that they could look at doing to support the deck. If we want to think of some other ideas of what they can do, one of the things that really springs to my mind is getting rid of that flip effect clause. So you could, for example, let's think of something powerful. Let's say field spells, right? Something you can search, something that's really strong and prominent in the game at the moment. What can we do to use a field spell that can improve the Shaddoll situation? So apart from increasing the number of monsters that they have at their disposal, we need to find ones that can special summon themselves more frequently, because then they act like extenders, which is something that I feel that they're really missing. And then what we could do maybe is, say, for example, have a field spell that turns their flip effects into on-summon effects. So they're all once per turn anyway, so you're not going to be abusing crazy amounts of effects. You're not going to be looping any or anything like that, but you get that on-summon effect. So what it would mean is that you would have more advantage in actually summoning these monsters, and they wouldn't become just bricks. You wouldn't have to set them all the time. Take, for example, Shaddoll Dragon. It's a 1900 level 4. That's pretty reasonable stats, and its effect would be, on summon, you target one card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. That's not crazy broken. There's nothing insane there, but it would mean that the deck was more viable. It means that you'd now play something like, potentially 3 Shaddoll Dragon. It would also have double up as having that back row effect, but you wouldn't be in a position where you're doing multiple of these things in one turn and it becomes crazy broken. And that was one of the main ideas I had. We could look at some simple support, because you don't see things like core and that kind of stuff getting used really, certainly not in the modern game. So you have to look at other ways that you can give the deck more spells and traps that can sort of improve on what they've already got in place already. So, for example, a generic searcher, a searcher for Shaddoll cards, like a reinforcement to the army, maybe a Charge of the Light Brigade type of thing. So you send 3 cards from the top of your deck to the grave, and then you add a card to your hand or something like that. So you would trigger some effects, but you're not going to be going crazy, because if you mill 2 of your dragons and then you add a dragon, well, now your dragon in hand is dead, and the 2 that have gone to the grave, only one of those is going to go off. So it wouldn't be, I don't think, too far-fetched to do that. It would mean that the deck would have some other ways to play, so you'd still be able to send things to the grave. But what we really want to do is be able to increase the number of Shaddolls in the deck that would be playable, and by giving them that normal summon effect, I think that would really, really improve things. It would mean that your fusions would always have access, so things like Shekanaga, where you need to have Shaddolls in hand. You don't want to be sat with Shaddolls in hand all game, because they're generally quite bricky at the moment. But if we introduce things that would allow them to have effects where they're on summons, they become less garnets and more you know, useful cards going forward, and that's what you really need in the modern game. For people to pick up these decks, that's the kind of thing that they need. I think that there's also a case for including a new Link monster. I know that they released, I think it was just called Shaddoll Construct, the Link version. I was really, really hyped when I first saw it, and then I, you know, took a proper look at it, and I tried playing it in some of my Shaddoll decks before, and it just doesn't work very well. The sideways arrows is a real killer. I understand that the idea is that you get it into a main monster zone. However, I really think that with the aim of Shaddolls in the modern format is that you want to potentially establish multiple fusions, and in order to do that you need to open up zones below the extra monster zone, and what you really need for that is a Shaddoll Link, maybe a Link 2 or a Link 3 with downward arrows. Even a Link 1 with a downward arrow would just open up extra zones, give the deck a bit more expansion, a bit more place to play. Even if you had the one with just a one downward arrow, you could then place the other second one underneath and then have two zones next to it and take advantage of those, because when they're sent, you know, they're generating you all this advantage and that kind of thing. And I think that that's probably the direction that they need to take things. So guys, those are just my thoughts and my ideas. I didn't want to take it too long-winded. We could sit here all day and discuss ideas that they can use to improve. I just thought that these were some really cool ideas that I would have liked to share with you and see what you think as well. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you've got any ideas on what they can do to improve the deck. Maybe you wanted another deck to win, and let's hear why you wanted another deck to take that competition. I mean, I'm sure that they've all got sweet spots in our heart, particular decks, and a lot of people wanted like Crystal Beasts to win because they're, you know, old school and cool. Burning Abyss, for example, is another deck that a lot of people would have liked, and things like that. I'd really like to hear what you think. If there's anything you disagree with, for sure drop it down in the comments, but thank you very much for checking in, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion content, a little bit of a difference to what we would normally do. I would love to get some more of these done. If you would like to hear them, please let me know. If you've got any ideas for content that you would like to hear, definitely let me know. It's always great to hear some more good ideas. So don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this video. If by chance you haven't had enough of listening to me waffle at you through a video about a children's card game, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. The links are on the screen, or if you're feeling really lazy, you can click the links in the description. While you're at it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content too. It'll make me smile, I promise. And who can ask for more than that? Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.